Okay, we're at just a little bit after 4, so I'm delighted to welcome everyone to the first in the Steptoe series called Inside the Creative Process. And I want to welcome you on behalf of Steptoe. My name is Beth Tractenberg, and I'm a partner in the Steptoe New York office. Before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items and then we'll get to speak to Kilian. As I've been saying, please do mute your microphones and also turn off your cameras so that we can just focus on Kilian. So thank you. Also, you may have noted that when you registered, you had an opportunity to submit some questions to Kilian, and we have gotten a number of questions. If you haven't submitted a question and you'd like to do so, please mute yourself. Whoever is not muted, everyone mute yourselves. If you haven't submitted a question, you can do so in the chat function here, and we'll try to get to everyone's questions before the end of the program. So with that, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our guest, Kilian Hennessy. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Kilian for some years now, and he's a wonderful person. And I've also gotten to have the pleasure of experiencing Kilian's incredible fragrances. And at this point, even in these pandemic days, I don't feel like I'm dressed and really myself and ready to start my day unless I've put on my favorite Kilian fragrance. So, Kilian, I would like to get started by asking you a question that I'm sure everyone is interested in hearing the answer to, which is, how did you know when you were a young person that you were really interested in fragrances? And at what point did you know that? And what did you do to start exploring your interests?
Hi, well, hi everyone. I think I got lucky, frankly. All stars aligned at one point. During my, I did a university in semiology, semantics, communication, that world. And at the end of my 4th year, I did an internship at Kenzo Perfume. And I really enjoyed myself. I loved the person I was working with. But perfume didn't really resonate from an advertising standpoint. And then when the 5th year started, we have been asked a bit in an emergency to write a thesis on top of our current program. And everybody went a little bit with whatever documentation they already had in order to fast forward the process. Because it was a heavy year and a short year. The year starts in October, ended in March, and we had so much work already. And so I just did an internship on perfume. So I was like, let me do something on perfume that will fast track the thesis. Meanwhile, when you are in a university, a state university in France, mine was called La Sorbonne. When you are in a state university, you have a very detailed way you have to write your thesis, and one of the things you have to do is to start with a question left unanswered by previous thesis. So obviously I had to read the previous thesis that were written on semiology and perfume, and the question that kept coming back from every thesis, frankly, was how can we communicate about a sense, the sense of smell, where we don't have a common vocabulary amongst people. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if we want to talk about the sense of the music and someone plays a do, the sound do is called do. And if you ask to a Chinese, a Japanese, an American, a Mexican, or a French, what is that sound? Everyone will say that's the sound do. So we have a word associated to a musical note. I can do the same thing with colors, with the sense of sight. if I show this white couch to anyone in the world, we're all going to agree that white is the proper word to describe the color of the couch. In the world of perfume, we work as perfumers with roughly 5,000 ingredients. And out of the 5,000, less than 20% are naturals. So 80% of the ingredients are synthetic notes. And those synthetic notes have barbaric names, you know. They can be called acétate de 6,3 hexenol, aldehyde hexylcinamique.
It all sounds good when you say it, Kilian. It sounds barbaric when others say it.
But what's interesting is that those notes actually exist in nature. And we, in the perfume world, have been able to isolate them in order to give different nuances to the perfumer, as if we could give more nuances of colors to a painter. So fast forward, my thesis, I mean, the subject of my thesis showed me that if I wanted to answer to the question in a proper way, the only way to do it was to actually put my nose in front of those notes. And so I decided to do a nose school in parallel with my 5th year. And the first day, first hour, first minute, when I started smelling, it was a stroke. It was love at first sight. I knew immediately that perfume was going to become my world. And it took over my world like a tsunami.
Wow. Well, that actually brings me to an interesting question that someone submitted, which I think is really a follow-on to what you just said. One of the questions submitted is, do you think a super refined sense of smell is part of one's DNA, or is it developed with training?
It is trained. It doesn't matter if your nose can smell at 20 meters away or 2 meters away only, because at the end you're putting your nose on a piece of paper or on the skin to judge the evolution of a perfume. So having a great nose, number one, I'm not even sure to know what it means, but above all, creation comes from two. I mean, first comes knowledge, and you need to learn your craft. You need to learn your notes. It's like asking a painter to know all his colors or a musician to learn all his notes. Quicker for them, they have less. So the process to learn all those notes is roughly 3 to 5 years. Then you start working on the combination, because three notes together will immediately give you the accord, the melody of that perfume from the market, and so on. So exactly like in music, you learn your melodies, your accords. That takes another 3 to 5 years. And then creativity, frankly, is in the mind. You know, I don't know if you saw the movie Amadeus on Mozart.
Yeah,
it was so well done. It was directed by Milos Forman, and at one point Amadeus says to Salieri, "But can't you hear the music? Can you hear it?" And he's just putting the notes on a paper, but he's like, "Can't you hear it?" Because he should be hearing it. And I think this is where talent comes from. Talent comes from when you put your recipe on a piece of paper. Can you smell what you're writing? Or can you write what you want to smell in the air?
That's really interesting. So can you, because you've had all this training and all this experience, think, and here we're getting into the creative process, can you think about scents and smell them in your head and think, oh, well, this note would go well with this note, and I want to combine them and create something new and different? Is that how you do it, or do you actually take the fragrances from the very start, the different notes, and combine them? How do you know what to combine? Is it trial and error?
Yes, exactly like cooking, trial and error. Knowing, we know what notes blend together. I mean, I can give you a lot of accords that blend together, and the reason I know it is because those accords exist on the market. They have been done, so I know the combination works well. But if you are into the business of creating new olfactive harmonies, and you want to give to your customer harmonies that they have never smelled before, then you're in unknown territory. So you're putting 3 notes together, and you're like, I don't know, let's try and smell. Exactly like cookie. You try, and it's not good, try again. It's not good, try again.
Can you give us some examples of what the notes are? What are some common notes that you use?
Oh, I use everything. I have 4 olfactive families in my that I have reorganized in my sense. One, I call them the fresh. So the fresh are, as a majority, built on citrus notes. So citrus are bergamot, grapefruit, mandarin, orange, neroli. Then you can have a freshness that comes from aquatic notes, and those were very strong in the 90s with Issey Miyake, Acqua di Gio, those perfumes. And then you had a freshness that was more, how can I call it, more clean. And that was the Rain of the Cool Water from Davidoff Perfumes. So fresh is usually a more masculine category. I have also another family that I call the narcotics. So the narcotics are built on floral notes, but I like to use narcotic florals and not so much romantic florals. I don't have a peony, a lily of the valley, a lilac. That doesn't really interest me. What interests me is tuberose, jasmine, gardenia, narcisse, roses. But I like my roses with the spikes.
It's okay, not too sweet.
And then I have another olfactive family that I call the cellars. So that's a bit of wing to my heritage. And those perfumes are built on accords of woods and resins and vanilla. And finally, I have another family that I call the smokes. Those are built on tobacco accords. So what we call tobacco is not cigarette, it's not cigar. We call tobacco perfumes that are built on tonka bean, honey, specific notes that have like a bit of a bit of a tobacco undertone, but really the tobacco leaf, if you want. And that's it. Oh, and also have in the smokes, I have also the scents built on bakhur. Bakhur is the Arabic name to incense. So it's the incense, the smoke of wood chips burning in the air.
That's so interesting. I know that you have different lines in your overall fragrance. How do you decide the different lines? Is it the way you've just outlined them, that they're based on the notes and the combinations?
Really, I only have one line. I mean, it's one line with different families.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the fragrances you design for men versus the fragrances you design for women? And
I don't design for men and for women.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, I would imagine that people go back and forth and use whatever they like.
Exactly. That's really one of the specificity of the niche perfume world, is that we don't judge, we don't put in compartments. We believe that nature is unisex, and our job is to work with nature. You would never say that a painting is feminine or a painting is masculine. So I think like an opera is feminine and an opera is masculine, or a play, you know. So I think that the same world about perfumes are unisex by essence, no pun intended. I think nature is genderless.
I know that one of the things you focus on is the layering of fragrances. Can you talk about that a bit?
So there's different layering options. There is the layering like the Jo Malone Do It, which is you can layer 2 or 3 perfumes one on top of each other. So in the case of Jo Malone, I understand, because Jo Malone's perfumes are very simple, jasmine and mint, or tea and basil. I mean, it's very simple, and then you become your own perfumer in a world. And well, if you like, one is called jasmine and mint, and the other one is basil and orange. You know what? The chances are that combining it together, it will smell good because the formulas are simple. Doesn't mean they're bad; they're just simple. And that was the style of Jo Malone, a bit like an English garden in a way. In my case, my perfumes are very complex, very, very complex, they're already multi-layered within each scent. So combining two scents that are already multi-layered, personally, I don't recommend it. And if I would, then I would have never finalized the scent the way it is. I would feel like it's incomplete. Some people do, and some people come to me and say, "Look, can you guess what scent I have on?" And it does smell amazing on them. But again, I think it's you can have a beautiful surprise. My guess is that you probably have more not so good surprise than good surprise. But then there's another way of layering, which is layering with the body lotion, the shower gel, and that's different because then it's increasing the projection and the diffusion of your perfume in the air. So I'm really much in favor of that.
Well, one thing you and I have discussed, which I find interesting, is that when I have worn your fragrance for so many years, I don't smell it anymore. So I'll walk by someone on the street and they'll say, "Oh, you smell so good." And I think, "Oh, well, I'm glad you can smell it. I can't smell it." Is there a physiological reason why that happens? And do you think the layering with the body lotion changes that?
I think it will at one point and then it will fade again. It's just that you saturate your olfactive receptors. So they're just oversaturated with that scent, so you don't smell it.
Well, that's too bad because I miss smelling it.
A good way is to keep changing location. You know, you can smell the perfume, you can smell your hair, you can do the body lotion, you can do the shower gel, you can do on the pulse points, you can. Gabrielle Chanel used to say, "Put perfume wherever you want to be kissed." So change your kisses location every day.
Okay. The names of your perfumes are extremely evocative. Do you come up with those? And maybe you could share what some of the names are for people who are not lucky enough already to be familiar with them.
Well, you are wearing a perfume called Liaison Dangereuse.
Yes,
Liaison
I am.
Dangereuse was inspired by one of my favorite books of all times called Liaison Dangereuse, written by a French author in around 1801 named Choderlos de Laclos. It's everything. I mean, it's a story. It's a book about. It's a book that is called a book épistolaire. I don't know how to translate that in English. It means that every chapter is a letter from one person to another. So it's just letters, and it talks about love and sacrifice and revenge and fading beauty. I mean, I think it's a gorgeous book. Anyway, so that is the one you're wearing. My number one in the world is called Good Girl Gone Bad.
That's my second favorite.
Yeah. Good Girl Gone Bad was part of a collection called In the Garden of Good and Evil, which was an olfactive metaphor of the Garden of Adam and Eve. And obviously, Good Girl Gone Bad is a metaphor of Eve, the good girl created by God who did not resist the temptation and went bad by biting the apple. My second one is, who's my number two? My number two in the US market is a perfume called Love Don't Be Shy. Don't Be Shy is one of my sweetest scent, probably my sweetest scent, and I wanted it like that. I really wanted a perfume that when you're so in love with someone, sometimes you just feel like you just want to take a bite out of this person. So that's why I wanted a sweet scent, and it's actually a marshmallow reconstitution. And it has become lately one of my top seller, and I think it's actually going to become my number one very quickly, because a famous rock star has been saying that. People have been saying that she wears Love Don't Be Shy. And I can confirm, because I met her a couple times and she was wearing Love Don't Be Shy.
Who is that?
Say it, but yeah.
You can't tell. Okay. Well, because one of the things you said that I find interesting that we talked about briefly is that when you read magazines or you see things in the Time style section, the articles will identify what the rock star or the actress is wearing, the clothing, the accessories, the jewelry, but they don't identify the perfume, which is often, I think, a bigger statement about someone's personal style than the clothing or the jewelry. So it's interesting that that's sort of the secret.
Yeah, well, yes. Not to mention that half of the celebrities already have a perfume endorsement contract, and the other half have a perfume under their own name. So it makes it difficult for them to supposedly not wear anything else. Well, they do. And that's the reason why, at one point, when social media started, I created the collection called In the Garden of Good and Evil, and instead of putting the bottle in a case in a beautiful wood coffret with the satin bedding like I was doing before, I decided to switch the design and put them into a clutch, because in my mind I was like, well, if we see a celebrity wearing my clutch, it means that she's probably wearing the perfume that goes with it.
Yes.
So it was a way to make visible the invisible, to give a face to a product that is faceless.
Well, that's a great idea, and the clutches are beautiful. But you've also moved into other more visible areas, like, for example, your lipsticks, which I notice have fragrance in them. I mean, real fragrance, not just a sort of cosmetic sweet smell. So what made you do that?
You're absolutely correct. But it's interesting because, in truth, every lipstick has a scent. It's just that over the years and years and years, because the big ones always have the same smell, which is the smell of violet and rose, a little bit old lady-like to me, but nice enough. I think people think that that's the smell of a lipstick. That's what a lipstick smells like with no scent, which is not the case. It's actually a scented lipstick with violet. The first lipstick company that actually made a move was MAC. And MAC scented their lipstick with synthetic vanilla. Now, MAC being the biggest and #1 lipstick brand in the world, I knew that vanilla and lipstick was widely accepted by women. So I looked at my perfumes that contain vanillas or more complex vanillas, and again, Love Don't Be Shy is what it is, exactly that. It's a complex vanilla. It's a marshmallow, but in order to create marshmallow, you use vanilla in overdose. So the lipstick ended up being scented with Love Don't Be Shy.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Well, I didn't know that there was a specific one that all of the lipsticks had. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to smell my lipstick more carefully the next time I use it. We have some questions from our audience that I'd like to have you answer, if you will. Here's one that's a little bit unusual. Someone asks, when you bring friends to visit your home in Paris, what are the 3 things you feel they must experience to understand the nature of the terroir?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Okay, what the question is, and we have the person who asked the question on with us. He could unmute himself if he'd like to explain it. That's you, Jim. He asked about when you bring your friends to visit your home in Paris, what do you think that they have to experience to understand Paris and the nature of Paris? There's Jim. I'll let him explain himself.
I was playing on the word terroir that you use when, typically for vineyards and a sense of place. And I really wanted to know, how do you show a sense of place in your home? what are the things that are essential when visitors come?
So my house is actually not in Paris, but in New York City. Right now, I'm in my house in Spain.
You spend a lot of time in Paris.
Sorry?
You spend a lot of time in Paris, and that's where
I have my kids living there, so I try to be back, yes, as much as I can. But my home is New York, and now I have a home in Spain, but my home is really New York. I think that I'm not. My apartment is not built for people. My home is built for me and my wife, and to feel that this apartment is going to be a beautiful place where we're going to enjoy living. Now, when you build a home, the structure itself guide you. You know, we bought an apartment in Tribeca, and it has big beam structures with light wood beam structures. All the walls are white. The wood floor is very light wood, and there is like 6 or 7 windows arched one after another. And the apartment is very lit, but it's very white. And we ended up actually putting a black carpet, black couches, black furniture, black dining room table, black chairs. And even though everything is black on top of it, it doesn't feel dark at all. So, you know, sometimes you have your taste, but I would say you have to play a bit with the structure. And that's what's interesting about building a home, is to play with the structure. My house in Spain is totally different. It's an old hacienda. It feels very al-Andalus. And then, so I want to have things that fit better. So here, everything is white. But I don't know. Have I answered your question?
Jim's muted himself again. It sounds like your process of decorating and it's much more than decorating. Creating a home is, in a lot of ways, very similar to your process in creating different fragrances. You try things, you see what works together. Someone has asked.
Not really, Beth. Not really.
Okay.
Because in perfume, you can try, and if it doesn't work out, you throw the modification to the trash, and then you move on. If I have a couple paintings and I don't like them and I want to get rid of them, maybe I can't, you know, and I have to live with them for maybe a long time. So the trial and error is actually much more complicated in a home.
You're right. You're definitely right.
No, you know what? That's why a home takes some time, because, and then now you have some apps that are actually so great. You know, you take a photo and then you can put the photo in where you think you want to put it in your apartment, and you kind of have an idea. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I like that too. We have an interesting question that just came in, which is, how do you work through your quote unquote writer's block, or if there is an equivalent? Do you ever get stuck? You just feel like, I want to create something, but I'm just not coming up with the right idea, and how do you get out of that?
You mean when in the process of creating a scent?
Yes.
Oh, it's always the same process, and it's always painful. And sometimes you feel like you're going to despair, and it's a bit of it's a succession of moments of joy when finally you have a note that blends with your melody, with your original accord. You know, Mozart used to say, I search for little notes that love each other. That's a bit how we work in the world of perfume. We look for little notes that blend with each other. And but sometimes you go 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and you tried 100 different ideas and none work. And I can guarantee that when something like that happens, you start to despair. So that's why it's a long process. It usually takes me 6 to 12 months.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was actually someone else's question you've answered. where do you draw your inspiration from, which I want to get back to, and how long of a process is it from the initial stages to the final product, which you've just answered, but you've spoken so interestingly about music and literature and how that's guided you in your process. Do you think about a piece of music or a favorite book or movie, and does that inspire you, or is it more of a sort of internal inspiration, and then you think about what the fragrance that you've created reminds you of, and then you name it? How does it actually?
No, the name always comes first. I see my job very, very, very close to the job of a movie director, in the sense that the same way a great movie is not only a script and an acting, it's also the production, the post-production, the special effects, so many things like into a movie. Perfume is a bit the same thing. You have the quality of the perfume itself, but you have also the bottle, the box, the names, and the image around it. You know, it's always more than the core itself. The other thing is that the same way that a movie director, you cannot imagine a movie director choosing his actors and actresses without knowing for which movie and what is the script, correct?
Correct.
It would be hard to say, oh, I want to play with DiCaprio and Winona Ryder, but I don't have a movie. I don't have a story. No, you first have a story and you imagine who will be able to interpret, who play the script the best. And that's exactly the way I work. Once I have my name, which is the emotion I'm trying to convey, then I'm thinking about who is going to be the perfumer, who's going to be able to help me express that emotion into scent. Because the same way that actors have different ways of acting, perfumers have different ways of composing a perfume. Some perfumers compose with very short formula, less than 15, 20 ingredients. And some perfumers cannot even imagine having a perfume with 20 ingredients. It cannot. For them, it's at minimum 100 ingredients. So it's two ways of composing perfumes. But depending on the emotion I'm trying to convey, then I choose perfumers differently.
So do you have different people you work with who help you to create?
I probably have 5 perfumers I work with.
And how did you find them and know that they are people with the creative spirit similar to yours who you could work well with?
I've been working in the industry for 25 years now, so I know everyone, number one. Yes. Number two, I am lucky enough to have a brand that most of the perfumers want to work with. So usually when I call them and say I would love to work with you, they're usually very happy.
I'm sure they are.
So that's helpful. I don't want to work with too many people at the same time because it's very time consuming. Usually to do 3 modifications, it takes like an hour and a half. So one morning is 2 sets of 3 modifications, 4 modifications. And maybe you lost half a day and you have nothing. You're leaving the place and you have 0, nothing, nada.
Well, I guess you don't want too many days like that.
Yeah.
So you need to know you have the right people to work with, and as you say, not too many of them.
Right. And that's why I only work with the best. But still, when weeks like that follow one after another and you come up with nothing, this is when you it's difficult. It's difficult because, frankly, the easy part, the quick path is easy. You have an accord. You're like, ugh, I'm stuck here. I don't achieve nothing. Let me put a bit of a Tommy Girl effect, or a bit of a J'adore effect, or a Coco Mademoiselle effect. It's easy, and then the perfume suddenly it blooms. Yeah, it blooms in a copycat direction, but it blooms. So it depends what you want. There is a niche perfume house, and usually I'd never say anything bad about anyone, but in that case, I'm going to make an exception. Her name is Louise Ramey from Bond Number 9. And the way she asked perfumer, she says, I want a pleasure some l'odeur with more hook. That's what she says. She copies every perfume of the market and she doesn't care. Doesn't care. So, and it becomes a joke because every perfumer knows it. So when she comes, she's like, she's going to ask me for the latest success.
It's funny you say that, Kilian, because I get emails from them every day and I unsubscribe and they still keep sending them to me. So that fits with what you're saying, I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, she's a horrible person. Horrible person. One day she tried to approach my business manager at Saks New York. So, and she called me, she says, look, Louise Ramey just approached me for an interview. I said, you should go. You should go and see what is how is she, and whatever, you know, out of curiosity, you should go. It's going to be interesting. She came back saying she's completely cuckoo. And during the entire interview, she kept saying, my goal is to wipe Kilian out of the face of the earth.
Wow. Okay.
So I don't know.
Well, yeah, that sounds pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So I will definitely never buy any fragrance from her. You have my solemn promise.
Yeah.
I have another question, which is an interesting and beautifully phrased question, which is that Hemingway was distraught when he could no longer put a good sentence on a page. Do you think your nose will always be faithful to you? Do you worry about that? Well, do you worry that your ability to create these wonderful scents someday may not be there? And I guess it's similar to the writer's block question.
One is if your nose technically doesn't work anymore and then you cannot smell. It's like losing your sense of palate for a chef.
Yes.
So in that case, I don't know how you can work, frankly, because you need to be able to control what you do. The other part of the question is when you have no more creativity, right?
Yeah.
I'm not worried so much about not having creativity because I have so many ideas that I don't actually have enough time to launch them all. My concern is actually another concern is what if you are not in tune with your customer anymore? What if everything you create, your customer doesn't like it anymore? And then you feel suddenly like your customer is not interested in your latest creations. That would be, and I think that inevitably at one point, it will happen. You know, it's hard to be a designer that stays on forever. Giorgio Armani is a good example, but when you think about it, there's not so many creators who really in command of the creation department and who can last for decades after decades. So, well, hopefully I still have maybe at least a good decade.
I'm sure you have well more than just one good decade. So I would not worry about that. I'm just looking over our questions. I think you've pretty much answered many of them, but someone asked, is technique as critical as imagination in the process of creating, and whether you can talk about that?
I'm not sure. Can you repeat, please?
Is technique as critical as imagination? Technique, critical knowledge, all of your training that you had from the Sorbonne and interning, is that what you rely on, or is it more your imagination and your creativity?
No. I mean, no, technique should be learned, digested, and part of you. You know, you don't think about technique anymore. No, the only technique to follow is really if suddenly the market would be evolving towards a different way of composing perfumes. But, you know, every year there is going to be one counterexample to that. So, no, really, the most important it's what's happening here. You know, it's inventing the future. It's creating new colors, new melodies that no one has ever smelled before. That's the trick.
That is a trick. And how do you even know if it's new or if it exists somewhere else out there?
Well, I haven't smelled every perfume that exists on the market, but I know at least the successful one. So I know that I'm not going to be doing a copy of a successful perfume.
Well, that seems like it really must involve a lot of knowledge that really is ingrained in you, that is not just from smelling something 1 minute and saying, okay, now I smell it and no, this is different from Good Girl Gone Bad. This is what something that I find very interesting about the creative process, particularly with fragrance and cooking, as you've said. I think when people are very good at cooking, they can taste things in their mind, and that is what leads them to think, oh, well, it might be interesting to combine these two flavors, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to take 2 bottles off the shelf and combine them. And is that to you an important part of your creation, knowing on a basic level, of course you have to smell things as you combine them, but knowing what certain scents are and thinking, well, I'll start out combining these 3 things and then go from there. Is that how the process works?
I'm not sure I understood everything, but yes, at first you have to come up with a melody, you know. It's exactly like in moving, it's exactly like in cooking. It can be as stupid an idea as to do a soufflé au caviar. Okay, let's do a soufflé au caviar and let's see what soufflé au caviar and cheese, melting cheese tastes like. And you try and you either find it disgusting or you find it interesting and you can work on it. Same thing with perfume, you know, ideas, just ideas. I don't know, bergamot and vanilla. That was the idea of Guerlain back in 1920. Bergamot and vanilla, as simple as that. And that is the accord of Shalimar.
Okay. Well, this is all so interesting. We have one more question that we have time for, and someone has written, how much time do you have to devote to the business side of your craft? You've alluded to that during our conversation.
Well, when I was not part of a group, then it was a big part, frankly, because I had to travel to every market, and I had to, so between the supply chain and the finance and the accounting, I mean, it was a lot. Frankly, I couldn't say exactly what percentage of the time was devoted to creation versus buying the goods versus supply chain versus anything. And as soon as I started to make money, I started having a team. When I was acquired by Estée Lauder, I think I had like 14 people working for me. Outside of the salespeople, obviously. But just in the Paris office, I think we're like 14, 16.
Do you work on every phase of the product? For example, do you have input in the clutches that you were talking about?
Yeah,
in the design of the bottle?
The one thing that I have not my input on.
Wow. Well,
yeah,
it shows. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. I want to thank you so much, Kilian. This has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much. And everyone who joined us, thank you for joining us. And I hope you'll be able to join us, including you, Kilian, in 2 weeks for the next in our series, where I will be speaking to Lar Lubovitch, who is the choreographer and founder of the Lar Lubovitch Dance Company, which has been in existence for an amazing over 50 years. And so I'm sure Lar will be interesting to speak with about his creative process. And we will also be showing some clips from some of his dances, and he will talk to us about that. But in the meantime, time. Have a wonderful rest of the day. I know it's late for you, Kilian, so thank you again for making some
Actually, I have to go
time.
pick up my kids who are like texting me. We are done. Come pick us up.
Okay, well, we're done too.
Okay.
Thank you so
Bye-bye,
much,
guys.
Kilian.
You're welcome.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.